That's 66 Bassman again. The story continues. If you haven't seen part 1, link in the description below or up top there. I highly recommend you watch part 1 first. This is just a refresher if you didn't see that. Shows the very badly rusted state of everything as it came in. And I wasn't sure if this was going to be fixable, but as I went through and did some little tests on both on the finish and then tested the circuit, I was more and more confident that this could be restored well. And I called the owner and explained to him all the options. And yes, this will be expensive, but he gave me the green light based on our past history and success rate. So here we go. I'm going to show you everything required to pull everything out of this down to the bare chassis so that we can restore it. The music that you're hearing is Brian Lindsay the other day playing his Telly and his Duesenberg through that 68 custom Deluxe Reverb I restored for him. Not restored, made into a real Deluxe Reverb. Sorry, I'm doing this free form without a script. You'll notice I'm having to add a little bit of fresh solder to a lot of these joints before I can get the old solder to flow, because it's all covered in like a film of corrosion that's just not letting the heat transfer very well. Here I'm removing the old knobs. 3 of the 6 are cracked. I'm going to see if I can repair them. If not, I will get some new ones and look into possible ways to age them cosmetically. If it's just the crack in the knob, usually I can super glue it pretty well. This one you can see the internal collar has come separated from the body of the knob, and that's frustrating, and just had to pull it and hope I wasn't damaging the pot shaft. So speaking of which, time to get all that hardware loose. People have said, why are you using a big socket wrench like that? It's way too much torque. It would be if I were holding the handle way back at the end. That would be massive torque. I just have it, I'm always gripping it right by the socket itself, so just a little more torque and a better grip than my hand can do by itself. So everything's under control there. I'm getting all the hardware put to the side. All the hardware will get cleaned subsequently. I'm removing those ground connections from the volumes, which are going to the brass control strip, so I can get everything out. Later I'll do the switch ground connection that I'm removing the switch here, but it's a lot easier to reach once the switch is loose to redo that one due to the way that modded ground tone stack lift is implemented, but that's going away later. So I'm getting the pots out, and I got to remove the bias pot to get the bass pot on the normal channel out. Just one of those things I forgot about, because other Fenders you don't, but on this model you do. And some of the pots were kind of tough to get out, as were the jacks, because you can see that the front panel was slightly bent. Something impacted that at one point, and it just shifts the brass panel in relation to the hole in the chassis and makes the pot kind of seize, or the jack kind of seize. That'll get all addressed when I put everything back together. There, I just undid that ground on that switch, like I mentioned. Now I have to be careful here because the front plate is kind of loose. I don't want it to get bent or damaged during the next steps. Now I'm using the big chassis iron and getting the grounds off of the brass control panel. There it is. That'll get cleaned up with some brass. So here I'm using that big iron to remove the death cap, polarity cap lead from the chassis. You notice I roughly cleaned that area from rust, because I didn't want to just superheat the rust and make it hard to remove that solder. Now I'm going through, and I'm going to start with the heater wires for the most part. I do some other things while I'm in this area, but the heater wires are my first priority. Once they're out of the way, then I can see everything else to undo that pretty easily. Undoing the power switches and fuses and stuff while I'm in the area, so to speak. Just stuff that might get burned if I'm not careful with those wires going over other stuff. There are the grounds being undone. Continuing on with the heaters. I know this is riveting to watch. Can't look away. This whole process I sped up over 5 times, so this is about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half worth of work to do all this. You're not going to have to sit there at my pace to see this, but I just wanted to really show everything involved, and it's a pain in the butt sometimes with those old corroded joints where the solder didn't want to flow. As I know these tube sockets are toast, I'm not being as careful as I would be if I were just disconnecting, intending to reconnect, but that's how it goes. So now I'm disconnecting all the connections that aren't heater wires, obviously. And if you've never done this before, take photos, draw pictures, make diagrams, label things, whatever you need to do. I know everything goes. I can almost do these in my sleep at this point. I can draw the entire thing out for you if I need to on a napkin without mistakes. And it's not because I'm so clever, it's that I've just done this so many times. It's like knowing your ABCs. Everyone who does it for a while eventually learns it. Getting that shared cathode out there. Now for the standby switch. And now we're going to do all the other secondary AC wiring, to the polarity switch, etc. What these videos cannot tell you, but other techs know, is what Fender amps smell like. Fender amps have a unique smell, so do old Marshalls. It's a lot better than typical Mesa smells. But you can also tell to a degree the history of an amp. Sometimes you're just like, oh, Nicotine City. Other times it's like, oh, was this Cheech or Chong's? The old octal sockets are also getting replaced. All that tarnish that's on everything, it's in the pin sockets too. There's just the contacts. No point in trying to clean that. Now I'm removing the bias board. Pretty typical stuff here. It's easier to disconnect these wires to and from it when it's up in the air like this. And this bias board will be completely rebuilt properly. All you see there was a temporary string of stuff I put in just to test the amp the other day. Starting to get the heater stuff out, trying to do this without burning the old wires. So you have to work fast and hot and be sure of yourself. I'm getting the little backer boards out from the bias area. And I'm trying here to loosen that pilot light lamp, but it's just way too corroded. So it's going to get a little spray of deoxit. Anyway, I come back to that. So I'm pulling the board, obviously, and it all comes out in one piece, and the backing board. Now I'm going to push all the transformer wiring through to the other side so I can pull the transformers after this. And sometimes it's better to untwist them to get them to pull through cleanly. Otherwise, you end up abrading the cotton cloth covering. That's not good. I wish I could do all this fast in real time. I'd make millions because I could do so many amps a year. But doing it right takes time. I'm getting the old rubber grommets out. They're going to get some new ones. Over time, that material degrades. First it becomes hard, then it cracks, then it no longer serves its function. I'm taking out this little standoff terminal that holds the 220Ks for the local feedback network for the output tubes. That's going away in the final version of this. This amp's not going to go out as a pure AB165. More on that to come. So after a little bit of time, that deoxit had done the trick and the pilot light came out. Now, what am I doing here? I'm taking off the switches, and I should have moved the camera a little bit. I'm using a little adjustable wrench for that, and then the socket for the jacks there. Pull out the depth cap, and then I'm going to go in. It's always tough to get something to fit in there. Probably a specialized tool I need to get just for those things, for the fuse holders, but a little patience and care will take care of that. Now the rear plate is off. I thought the camera was going to show that, but it just missed it. Now I'm using the chassis iron to get these two ground wires, cathode connections, out. The one on the right had a lot of corrosion and it just wasn't taking heat very well. Eventually got it out. Removing the filter caps board, and there's a solder blob I pointed out that's pretty common. Now I'm removing the preamp tube sockets. Doing it by hand, I wanted to control the torque there. I didn't want to strip anything. With those sheet metal screws, there's only so many times you can put in and take out a sheet metal screw, and if anything goes wrong, it strips, and you got to drill it out and go to a machine screw. So I'm doing it by hand. Boy, that looks beautiful, doesn't it? Those little spring retainers are getting tossed. They're non-original to the amp, and the amp will be getting some bear traps, which is what this model should have. I think they do a much better job, too. There had a screw that was stuck to the base of that spring clamp. Octals out. Oh, they're so pretty. Now time to remove the choke. Now I'm doing the output transformer. I'm doing the two which have mechanical screws from one side first. Then I'll do the two machine screws. Doesn't this whole thing look just so tasty? I'm going to hand clean up those transformers after a while. The chassis is going to get dealt with first, but the transformers are in good shape. They're not beautiful on the outside, but I wasn't worried about any structural issues or anything electronically wrong. Getting those caps nuts out to remove the power transformer and those ground tabs, which will not be reused. And there we have it. Everything is out. All the little parts are going to go in a separate container for cleaning. All the larger parts are being put to the side, will be individually cleaned, and then it's time to go to the chassis restoration. Now, I'm not going to show you everything I did to the chassis because it would be really long and boring, but I gave Evaporust a try. So I did 12 hours completely immersed in Evaporust, and then I took the chassis out of the Evaporust after 12 hours. And I initially was very disappointed because it had a whole bunch of dark spots still on it. But, everything is a process. So when I took it out of the Evaporust, I washed it off with very hot water to get all the Evaporust off. And then I put it in a 300-degree oven. I wiped it off after the water. Then I put it in a 300-degree oven to get it hot enough that any surface water would go away. Then I let it cool a bit. Then I took some naphtha and applied it to the entire chassis. And just with a paper towel, at that point, all the gunky stuff that was remaining on the chassis came up very easily, and I got to a very good point. At that point, I then washed the whole thing with acetone, let it dry, and there were a couple spots I thought needed a little bit more work, so I gave it another 12 hours in the Evaporust. And again, wash it off in hot water, put it in an oven to dry with the naphtha, and that's what you're going to see now. It's not perfect yet. More on that in a little bit, but it's a huge difference. So I'm going to start by reminding you what things looked like before. So all that rust on the chassis, all that yuck on the tube sockets, and that turns into so much better. You can see the serial number now. The tube shields did darken in the process. That's not from vinegar. That's just what that metal looks like at this point in its life. Vinegar can discolor steel. Here's the old chassis, another view, and the doghouse cover, and all that yuck, and here it is now, and it's so much better. Again, same process for both kinds of metal. The doghouse cover ended up being that beautiful, almost copper. It's really pretty, but everything looks so much better. Now here in the preamp tube socket area, you can see how yucky it was. Now it looks like this. Really nice. You can see some little spots remaining. The final stuff I do will take care of that. And if this thing just has some patina, some character to it, I think everyone's going to be fine with that. Structurally, electronically, it's going to be perfect. And then by the output tube sockets, you can see there how yucky all that stuff was. Here's that same area now. Smooth. And then just some shots of the inside, that spot there and over there by the other input jacks. Those were really rusty before. Same for over here. You can see little smudges of stuff and some light rust on the right. That is a little flash rust that happened in the time I was setting this video up. So a little WD-40 got that off. The final steps will take care of that, as well as the little residue you see all over everything. This has not been thoroughly washed yet. And another view here. It's night and day. It's glorious. I'm really pleased with how this came out. I think the owner's going to be very happy. Next up, this chassis is going to get a bath in some acetone, get everything off of it, all fingerprints, etc. off. Put on some gloves. We're going to seal this thing so the rust can't return. And then we'll rebuild all the goodies inside. But that will be in the next video.